This Yuletide Miniseries is a replay of episodes originally published in 2024. This way, the episodes are conveniently queued up in your podcast player so you don't have to go searching for them, and you never lose your spot in the listening order. As always, we're celebrating Yuletide in real time in the Numinous Network. I hope you'll join us for daily altar time from 10 to 10:30 a.m. Pacific, starting December 21st, winter solstice, and going through till New Year on January 1st. We're gathering on Zoom to check in, light our candles, and do a 20-minute guided trance journey to connect with the Yuletide theme of the day. So join us in the Numinous Network for Yuletide. Sign up at carmenspaniola.com. Welcome back to The Spirit of Yuletide, a Numinous podcast mini-series where we explore European folk magic traditions of the winter season. It's so lovely to have you here for some calmness, creativity, and connection through the holidays. Last time I'm going to mention this. If you're familiar with my cookbook, The Spirited Kitchen, this mini-series will be a companion and massive expansion to the overview in the Yuletide chapter. And if you're not familiar with my cookbook, and you enjoyed this podcast, then I think you'll love the book because it's the same concept, animist, anti-capitalist folklore traditions for the entire wheel of the year, every season, and of course it would make an excellent gift. If you're completely new here, I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, and in this episode, I'm sharing a bit of food lore. Now, many of us are already gravitating towards the comfort foods of winter. But why not do so with a spiritual intention in mind? Why not try to add another layer of meaning and symbolism as you cook or bake? You're already whipping up a spell of nurturance and nourishment. Why not incorporate some of the folklore and history so it becomes even more symbolic, even more spiritually medicinal, and even more good sustenance for your mind and heart? Maybe something in this episode will resonate with you and inspire you to try a new recipe. Maybe this is the year you try making panettone or plum pudding from scratch. Or maybe you opt for goose or ham instead of turkey. And in this way, it becomes an offering to Odin or the ancient dead. There will be more food lore and kitchen witchery sprinkled throughout the series, but hopefully this sparks something in your imagination and helps you plan ahead.
Yuletide foods. The magical meaning of menus and ingredients. If you're a kitchen witch, Yuletide is such a glorious time. Perhaps this list of selected Yuletide foods will add a sprinkling of symbolism and add a bit more magic to your menus this season. Apples. Apples are symbols of love, immortality, healing, magic, and abundance. Beer. Beer is associated with elves, particularly the Alfir of Norse mythology, who are also connected with Freyr because he was gifted the realm of Alfir, the land of the elves, when he cut his first tooth as a baby. Boar. Hey, if you live in a part of the world where you can access game like boar, why not? In some versions, boar is the prized game of the wild hunt, and it's associated with Freyr, who sometimes rode into battle or was flown across the sky on the back of a wild boar. Bûche de Noël. This is a sweet jelly roll representation of the Yule log and a symbol of the rebirth of the year. The ingredients suggest that the Bûche de Noël is likely a recent invention of the 19th century. However, the traditional marzipan and meringue mushrooms, those decorations have been around since the Middle Ages. Candy canes and sweets. Neither candy canes nor any other sugar-based confection was associated with Yuletide until after the Industrial Revolution, when mass production made it possible to bombard us with highly technical decorative sugar arts. Sugar was rare in the 17th century and a luxury in the 18th, but by the late 19th century, it was considered a staple of daily life. By then, it had become a central feature of Christmas. Most holiday lore around candy canes being invented in the 1600s or fashioned after shepherd's crooks and other such urban legends are not true. However, peppermint has long been considered medicinal, and sugary peppermint candies were used as throat lozenges during wintertime starting in the late 1780s. A candy cane machine that could twist two colors of candy together, then bend and cut the canes at consistent spacing, wasn't patented until the 1950s. Citrus. Especially for folks who live in northern climes, citrus fruits have long been considered an exotic treat and a symbol of the sun, vitality, wealth and prosperity, and the sweetness of life, perfect for solstice. Chocolate and cocoa. Thank you again, Industrial Revolution. For the 28 centuries prior to the 1800s, cocoa and chocolate had been the realm of the elite. With mechanization, chocolate was finally available to the masses, though it still cost quite dearly, so was mostly enjoyed during holidays. New traditions, like getting 3 pieces of chocolate from La Befana, Italy's Christmas witch, spread rather quickly. Eggnog. Though the name eggnog wasn't coined until the 17th century, the drink itself is styled on what was previously called posset, a hot, eggy, milky drink mixed with sherry, honey, and spices that was hugely popular since the Middle Ages, sometimes curdled with citrus to be more custardy. The drink was associated with special Yuletide feasts because of the luxurious spices used. Fruit cake. Recipes for cakes made with honey, nuts, and dried fruit date back to ancient times. But what we think of today as fruit cake didn't appear until about the Middle Ages, and even then, dried fruits were considered expensive and exotic and saved for holidays. Copious amounts of alcohol were used to preserve the expensive cake. Fruit cakes were special because the preparation of them was such a massive affair, sometimes calling for just the eggs alone to be beaten for half an hour. Ginger. Ginger root, first cultivated in China 5,000 years ago, has long been a major trade good along the Silk Road. The first gingerbread people are credited to the court of Queen Elizabeth I, and gingerbread bakers in 15th century Germany even had their own trade guild. Decorated gingerbread houses were linked with Yuletide by the annual performance of Hansel and Gretel. Goose. Goose was the roast of choice for Yuletide feast because they were the fattest and most ready for dispatch after eating all the fallen grain through the early winter. Goose was also considered a sacrificial offering to Odin and Thor. Grains. Wheat, oat, barley, and rye are the 4 grains that can be successfully grown in Northern Europe. In his Nordic baking book, Magnus Nilsson describes them as little solar energy storage units and notes how critical they are to the Scandinavian diet. Since the summer growing season is so short, it's difficult to create surplus, and the winters are so long. Other grains do feature in Yuletide festivities, such as rice porridge, only less so. Lingonberries. Lingonberries are an evergreen boreal fruit often harvested and preserved in the fall that bring much-needed brightness, vitamins, and nutrients to folks living in circumpolar regions in winter. In Sweden, sprigs of lingonberry form St. Lucia's crown of candles near the solstice. Ham. Ham is a sacrifice to Freyr and Freya, also the prize of the wild hunt, and an offering to keep werewolves at bay. It's a symbol of wealth to secure abundance and good fortune in the year ahead, and a nod to immortality and the dying and rising god. Honey. Celtic peoples considered honeybees to be sacred messengers and treated their colonies like family, with traditions like the telling of the bees, keeping the hive informed of marriages, births, deaths, or major changes in the household. This was common throughout the Isle of Bees, as the Welsh nicknamed Britain. Since honey is an ancient symbol for the nectar of life, communal health and well-being, and it is a natural fit for Yuletide themes of rebirth and solar energies of vigor, vitality, and conviviality. Nuts and seeds. Since ancient times, nuts and seeds have been symbols of fertility, growth, abundance, and regeneration, the very foundation of life, so they are prominent at winter solstice. Panettone. Panettone is a Milanese holiday cake bread sort of thing. It's also made with citrus, dried fruit, and honey. The Oxford Companion to Italian Food says it keeps so well that in many Milanese households, a quarter of this festive bread would be hidden away until the 3rd of February, the feast of San Biagio, a saint who intercedes for those with earache and sore throats, when as a potent relic of the Christmas rites it would be eaten for breakfast to ward off winter colds. This survival from ancient Christmas rites was once connected with family rituals around the ceppo, a tree trunk or log decked with evergreen fronds, upon which gifts for the household and family were placed, and which, after their distribution, was ceremoniously burnt on the fire, libated with wine by each participant, and poked to send up glittering sparks to delight the children. Then the ashes were carefully preserved to protect crops from hailstorms. Plum pudding. Also called Christmas pudding, this cake was traditionally filled with charms tucked into it as a form of New Year divination. In ancient times, this cake was actually made with meat and root vegetables. Nowadays, the only nod to its origins is perhaps the occasional carrot and some suet. Plum meant prune, and in this context eventually came to mean any dried fruit. Stir